What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. What is happening? I was on hole 18 about 15 minutes ago, and I look at my phone and I see about 10 text messages. One from the podcast group text, and about from 15 other people with the rap sheet tweet as I'm lost $120. Not a great day for your boy out there on the links. The Deebo Samuel has been traded to the Washington Commanders for a fifth round pick. And by all indications, the information I have, I spent about 5 minutes on the internet before I press play here, is that the Commanders will take his salary of like $17 million this year. So the 49ers get rid of the salary and they get a fifth round pick for a guy that a couple days ago it was reported that Deebo Samuel had asked in basically the exit meetings, like, it's probably time, like, I would like a trade, I would like to move on. And then John Lynch said that we will honor that. You don't often hear GMs at the combine press conference talk like that. Like, we plan on honoring his wishes. If I'm reading between the lines, Deebo Samuel was not going to be on the 49ers in 2025 if he hadn't asked for a trade. Like, they would have tried to trade him. I think worst case scenario, they would have cut him. So like Deebo Samuel's time, the moment that season ended, he was not going to be a 49er anymore. Now, I want to say this because I think sometimes in these moments, there's going to be a lot of, like, I saw in 49er land, we got rid of his salary. That is a huge win. We don't have to eat any of the money. We get rid of it. And listen, it usually for most players, especially a guy who has been a key piece on one of the best teams in the league over the course of his career, doesn't end that well sometimes, right? And Deebo Samuel did not have a good season, but he's a fucking war daddy. And when Deebo is right, he is a championship level player. I mean, some of the biggest 49er wins of the Kyle Shanahan era, and there have been a lot. They won a lot of playoff games. They won a lot of huge regular season games, primetime games. And that guy was a big reason. Now, the guy we saw last season was not that version of Deebo that had been, one of the key pieces to one of the best teams in the league. I do believe this. And I'm a Deebo Samuel, I'm a huge fan because I believe in the NFL to win at the highest level, like, you need war daddies on Sunday. And Deebo Samuel's versatility, his physicality, and just his mindset in these big games, like, you want guys like that in the trenches with you. And I think for the Commanders, like, when Cliff was in Arizona, he used a lot Rondale Moore. They had another little guy, and Deebo's not little, but he used versatile pieces. So to me, you get this guy, Adam Peter knows him well, right? He was part of the front office that not only drafted him, but for all those years that had a front row seat right there with John Lynch when Deebo was making huge plays. And I will say this, I have been to a ton of NFL games in my lifetime. And in 2000, it probably would have been either late December 2021 or early January 2022. The 49ers had to win the game in Los Angeles to make the playoffs. If they did not win the game, they would not have made the playoffs. And they were getting their teeth kicked in the first half. I think the score at halftime was either 17-3 or 20-3. I was there. It felt like 100-0. It was like the Niners are about to lose this game 45-10 and not make the playoffs. Deebo Samuel had, I would say, in my life going to games, as good of a half as I've ever seen. I think he ran for a touchdown. He threw a touchdown. He basically became their running back. This is pre-Christian McCaffrey. He was an absolute war daddy, running guys over, running through guys, making plays in the pass game. He was elite. He really was. And he had so many of those games. And this is a team like the Commanders who need to bring in a guy like Deebo Samuel, minus 2024, has been a part of winning consistently. And he's played a key role. And to me, there's a physical element to his game that just translates in big games. Now, I think a lot of people will say, well, he's just not the same guy. He's a lot of miles on those tires. He's 29 years old. I promise you this, I would bet on Deebo Samuel, not for the next 10 years, not for the next 5 years, but I would not be shocked at all if you get the best version of him these next couple years, and specifically in 2025. I think the Commanders are going to get a good player in 2025. I think he's going to be motivated. I think he's going to play well because last year, for his standards, for 49er standards, and for, a guy making a lot of money and viewed as a really good player, was a really bad season. Now, he's battled injuries over the years from shoulders to hamstrings. Weight has been a concern. But I will say this I love uh, guys in the sport that when the biggest games happen, you can win with that guy and you can rely on that guy. And honestly, if he's playing well, he can carry you at points in time in those individual games. And I have seen Deebo do that for half a decade for the 49ers. So, I mean, it's a sad day. Uh, it's weird, right? It's a business and you got to move on. You unload contracts. But like a huge part of the Kyle Shanahan success, and Kyle's gotten multiple contract extensions. Like this guy's played a huge role. And the Commanders know that well because Adam Peters has been there. And plus, like I said, with Cliff Kingsbury, using a versatile player like this, but this is also the benefit when you are a team like Washington or all these teams with big cap space. You can go, well, we can basically get them on a year to year basis. So we don't have to pay like a true quote unquote free agent huge money. And if we get one really good year out of Deebo, if we can get 75 catches, he can play some running back, he can return some kicks. If he can give us, 7 to 8 touchdowns and kind of show guys what it takes physicality to play with the Eagles. I mean, Deebo, even though AJ's his guy, like hates the Eagles. So I think you bring that guy in. Like, I like the move for Washington and I like the move for the 49ers. And this is also why in the draft, like last year, the Niners took a bunch of shits. Like, you're taking Ricky Pearsall. You don't need a wide receiver. I mean, at the time, Ayuk's holding out. You already got Deebo under contract. Juwan Jennings, is kind of an up and coming player. And I remember learning years ago, early on in my NFL career, I think Louis Riddick told me this one time, and it's so true. Anytime you think you have a strength, and it's true, like the Eagles can have a really good offensive line. Then all of a sudden you get a couple injuries, and all of a sudden your strength can become a weakness. Not for them because they have about 10 offensive linemen on the team. But like the 49ers, all of a sudden Ayuk gets hurt, Deebo's banged up, and you look at the wide receiver room, you're like, what the hell? But then toward the end of the season, Ricky Pearsall comes in. It's why you never draft for need. You just take the best player on your board. And by the end of the season, Pearsall looked pretty good. And now they're really going to have to depend on him. And one of the things with Pearsall was like going over the middle, breaking tackles, playing that physical role. And now moving forward, like, it's going to be Purdy. It's going to be Christian McCaffrey. It's going to be George Kittle. And it's going to be Ricky Pearsall with Brandon Ayuk and Juwan Jennings. So this is a big hole for the 49ers. Like, this is a guy that they have not only relied on for a long time, but built game plans around. And that's what I think makes the Commander situation a little unique. They already got, a true number one in Terry McLaurin. I'm sure in this draft, they will probably, like, to me, they either need a tight end or a running back. And on the second day, there are going to be really good tight end and running backs on the board. If you can get kind of a bellwether running back and use Deebo as kind of a slot player, Terry, on the outside with Jaden McDaniels. I just call him Jaden McDaniels. It's been a long day. Jaden Daniels. Um, yeah, man. I think this is also in football when you leave to another team and you make these moves, you feel so much more comfortable pulling the trigger on a trade like this. And really, if you're the Commanders, it's just do we want to allocate whatever $17 million of cap space or whatever? Sometimes trades make it a little different, but 15 to 20 million, whatever the specific number is on our books. Because a fifth rounder, who gives a shit? Like if Deebo's a starter and playing well, whether we're paying him 15 or 18, like are we cool with this guy being on the team? And there are probably some teams that were interested, but if you don't have a coach on the staff who's worked with him, you don't actually know him personally. There are a lot of things out there. Well, he's been banged up. Weight's been an issue. Like Adam Peters knows him really well. He honestly couldn't know him that much better. So you're much more comfortable making a move like this. And yeah, I just think that it's kind of the end of an era. The 49ers are in a weird spot because they're in a transitional period, but they're going to have huge expectations next year. It's not like it's going to be any different. And the Commanders just kind of add to their war chest. And let's face it, like they were just in the NFC Championship game. A little fluky in the sense that, like, they played the Lions, who were just fucking decimated on defense. Not fluky with the quarterback, but Commander fans will acknowledge like their roster post Jaden Daniels and like McLaurin and a couple other guys isn't that great. It's going to be dramatically better this season with free agency, another draft, adding guys like Deebo. So you're going to feel that like maybe our record, like they could win 11 games where last year they won 12 and be a much better team. And having a guy like Deebo also like throw it to him on screens, throw it to him behind the line of scrimmage. It gives you a lot of easy layups. Now, he dropped the ball a lot last year, which I think drove the 49ers nuts. And I do think this gets back to last year in the Super Bowl. If you depend on Deebo to be kind of like your go to wide receiver, he's not just getting open with out routes and slant routes. And like he couldn't get open against the Chiefs. And that was something, and Tim Kawakami has reported on this for years, I guess a year, is like that kind of bothered the 49ers, which to me, it's like, I remember being at that Super Bowl 2 years ago in Vegas and being with the Chiefs. They're like, yeah, we don't think Debo's not gonna like get open on us. It's like, yeah, guys, like that's not really Debo's thing. And I think sometimes Kyle can be kind of hard headed with him, and the relationship had just ran its course. But I'm sad. I thoroughly enjoyed the Deebo Samuel experience. I just saw him when I was flying out to New Orleans. He was on my plane. I thought he looks good. I mean, he's a very unique body type, right? Because when you stand next to him, he doesn't look like these wide receivers. They're like linear and thinner. He's just a thick dude. I mean, he's built definitely in his lower body much more like a running back or a linebacker. But to me, the mindset and the way he plays when he's going is something you don't teach. Even in at the highest level of football, some guys want contact more than others. And I don't blame any guy that doesn't want contact. I mean, you get fucking mollywhopped by some safety or linebacker running a 4-4, it's going to hurt. Debo seeks that shit out. And a huge part of the 49ers' point of difference over the years has been like, we're going to get in a heavyweight fight and we're going to break you. And they did that to the Cowboys a couple times. They used to do that to the Rams all the time. And then the Rams, I think because losing the 49ers so often in the regular season, like their team's a lot more physical now. And look at the players that they just got in Puka Nakua. Like that stuff always translates. Now, Puka is a much better route runner and a quote unquote true wide receiver. But overall, I think it's an easy trade for Washington to make. It's a no-brainer trade if you're going to trade Deebo. Like you weren't going to get much to unload his salary to not have to eat any of the money. And listen, I'm not some like sappy guy when it comes to this, but it is kind of sad. I mean, it's just kind of the end of a run. I mean, this was kind of, I mean, he was the core group of Trent, Fred Warner, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk. Even Christian McCaffrey like just showed up a couple years ago. Debo's got drafted like his rookie year was 2019, the year they made the Super Bowl. And by the end of the season, he was really coming on. And then the team that went to conference championship after conference championship after conference championship, and he really got that started back to that year in the 2021 season when he kind of carried them into the playoffs before McCaffrey showed up the following year. He could play running back, which I think at this point in time in his career, and listen, I don't know if it was injuries. I don't know if it was uh, I mean, maybe he is losing a little bit of a step, but he definitely wasn't as fast playing running back. Like I thought a couple years ago, he could just turn into a running back. And if he had been a full time running back, could have ran for 1,400 yards. The 49ers, whenever they tried to use him doing that stuff this year, didn't quite look the same. Definitely didn't quite look as fast. But then there would be moments late in the season where he would show it a little bit when he caught the ball. So overall, like I said, I still think he's got good football left, and I would expect a good season from him if he can stay healthy. It would not shock me at all if he has a very very productive season for a team. Like let's face it, in a weird way, the Commanders' expectations because of what happened last year are going to be outrageous. They're going to be, especially if they have they land a couple solid free agents, they have a good draft. Like they're going to be viewed as a team. It's like, well, you made the conference championship last year. Your roster's much better. That you can rely on this guy to win big games, and he can go to war when you're playing like the Philadelphia Eagles, when you're playing the Detroit Lions or the Minnesota Vikings or the Rams or the 49ers. Like he's a guy that you feel very comfortable. It's like he's on my squad. And they're just, beside like the elite guys, which he's not in that tier, but once you get to that next tier of guy, and this is where it was kind of out of whack with the 49ers because it was like he was in this weird his own little tier and he wasn't producing, but yet he was making a lot of money. And it's why usually you see some breakups at this point in time. And anytime, to me, as a general manager, when you can acquire a guy for nothing. Like, to me, here's the other thing with NIL, the drafts in like the fifth, sixth, and seventh round suck compared to what they used to be. You know why? Because the amount of kids that go back to school that would have been in the draft, right? Because I'll just play out. I get paid NIL. I get paid to stay. So the end of the draft used to be better because more underclassmen would come out. Not every underclassman is like the 10th overall pick. There are juniors getting drafted in the second and third round because it used to be like, well, I need the money, right? I don't come from much. How do I turn down getting a 4-year contract and making $1 million a year? It's like now I'll just stay at Texas A&M or UCLA or Washington or you name the school, and they're paying me $2 million, and I can technically keep improving theoretically, and in a year get drafted even higher while I'm banking 800 grand, $1 million, which is guaranteed. Because, in football, you get pushed down the draft. All of a sudden, you're a fourth, fifth rounder. You're not even guaranteed to make the team. And all of a sudden, you're on the practice squad, which for most people in society, it's like almost $200,000 a year. Great gig. But $200,000 a year, if I'm a starter at fucking Texas or Florida State, like 200 grand ain't a starter. Starting money's like 750, 900, a million, and a car and all this other stuff. So I think that you got to factor that in too. I would always, if I had cap space and I felt comfortable acquiring, in this example, Deebo Samuel, I wouldn't even hesitate. And I have a ton of cap space. The other thing with free agency, and I love talking about free agency as much as the next guy, when you actually see the list of guys available, it's pretty random. It's not a bunch of, superstar players. Like, you don't look at the free agent market and you go, well, the three quarterbacks are Herbert, Jalen Hurts, and Brock Purdy. The two tight ends are Mark Andrews and George Kittle. The running back is like Saquon's an outlier. A lot of times when you see free agents that hit, it's not always these guys getting big money. Sometimes it's like random guys like Zach Bond, 1 year, $3 million, like struck oil. Because most elite guys or just high-end Pro Bowl impact players get extended. In worst case scenario, I can't extend you. Kansas City Chiefs, franchise tag. Now, sometimes a franchise tag ends up getting traded or moves teams, but one thing in my experience being around the NFL, working in it, doing this, podcasting now for a long time, and this time of year, free agency is not like these other sports. Like when Juan Soto or Aaron Judge or Kevin Durant or whatever are hitting free agency, they're 100% hitting free agency. In the NFL, it's like these five guys are free agents. They're all pros. All of them either get franchise tagged or extended. that always happens. So the sweet free agent, I mean, one of the best free agents over the last couple of years, I remember Christian Kirk was like the top wide receiver, and he ended up being good for the Jags. But it's like, it's usually not like, well, Chase and CeeDee Lamb are hitting free agency. It's not the way it works. So when you feel comfortable doing this with a late round pick and you got the money, it's a no brainer. And listen, and here's the other thing with the Commanders. And the 49ers benefited from this the last couple of years with Purdy, making $1 million. When you have a guy, and because you're the number 2 overall pick with, in the draft, you're not making $1 million. Jaden's making $6, $7, $8 million. But relative to these other guys making 40 to 60, it is a huge, huge advantage for you to land players. And one of the ways to essentially land free agents now are guys that teams want to get rid of and use a late round pick. You're basically just bailing them out of the salary and you're acquiring a player. And you don't have to give some contract to. He's already under contract. So you just take the contract and you basically get to operate year to year. So, yeah, I guess my overall reaction is no-brainer move for Washington. I'm excited to watch Deebo. I think he's going to be good. No-brainer move for the 49ers. You get a draft pick, you unload the salary. I also just think, like, it's kind of sad. I mean, I watch this guy. I watch every snap of the 49ers, and he's played in a lot of huge games and had a lot of huge moments. And you could feel it kind of slipping this year. Not like, obviously, he had a bad year, but I just mean, like, the mojo with the team, everything was off. I mean, this was the guy for a couple years in, like, the peak when they were rattling off, like, 12, 13 wins would like lead the team out of the tunnel with Trent Williams. Like they were the tandem with the boombox. And now that's over. So I think you kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel with this 49er team. Like they got to shift. And John Lynch mentioned that. Like we got to get younger. We got to pivot off some guys and starts with Deebo. And I know there were also some rumors about Brandon Ayuk being available. I don't know why anyone would trade for Brandon Ayuk when he had an ACL, MCL, and like ligaments. So I feel pretty confident that Brandon Ayuk will be on the team. But hell, you never say never in pro sports. But Washington Commanders now have Deebo Samuel. Who would have saw that coming at the day's beginning?